Hello everybody and welcome to my 9,000 subscriber special, If I Could Balance Overwatch. First off, I want to thank all my subscribers for helping me achieve this goal. It's such a wonderful feeling hitting a milestone. I'm going to keep trying my damnedest to put out fun and quality content for you guys and gals. Without further ado, If I Could Balance Overwatch. Before we start, I want to talk about the characters who I think are fine as is. Ana, Lucio, Reaper, Widow, Tracer, Wrecking Ball, and Zarya. Sure, some of them are annoying, but I feel Blizzard has hit a good spot with these heroes. Onto the actual balance I want to see. I decided the best way to sort the changes is by direction instead of by name. So this video will be starting with characters who I think need nerfs, then simple buffs, soft reworks / additions, and then finally full reworks. Like past videos, I will talk the changes and then explain my reasoning behind it. Okay, let's begin with nerfs. In my opinion, the biggest problem in Overwatch right now is burst damage. Because bursty heroes are so good, it hurts diversity in the damage class. Why pick Ashe when you could go Hanzo and get a one-hit kill? Starting with Doomfist. Doomfist Rocket Punch will have its impact damage cut in half from 100 to 50. And the damage from hitting a wall will be lowered as well, going from 150 to 100. This means that if Doom hits a fully charged punch on you, the max damage you will take is 150, which is not a one-shot. However, a tiny compensation is that Rocket Punch charge time will go down from 1.4 seconds to 1.2 seconds. In my opinion, Doomfist Rocket Punch is too good. It does so many things well. Mobility, a stun, burst damage, one-shot potential, and bonus health on hit. So I'm toning down one of those aspects. Rocket Punch damage is going down. Doomfist players will now have to commit more after dealing damage with Punch. Next is Nini Hanzo. Primary damage lowered from 125 to 95. Projectile speed reverted from 110 back to 125 meters per second. Hanzo is currently the jack of all trades, master of all of them. Great burst damage that can one-shot, spam damage with storm arrows, a lunge to evade dives, and a reveal for his whole team. My idea is to remove Hanzo's one-shot capability on his primary attack. A headshot with this Hanzo will deal 190 damage, not a one-shot. Because Nini Hanzo is losing his one-shot, he's getting his arrow speed reverted to ensure that hitting these weaker arrows is easier. McCroak. Primary fire recovery time increased from 0.42 to 0.5. Health increased from 200 to 225. Honestly, I was debating on saying McCree is fine, but I gotta admit, I kinda like the direction Blizzard was thinking of taking him in one of the recent PTRs. In that PTR, McCree had 250 health, which many thought was overkill. This version ups his health a smidge, while also lowering his damage per second by a little bit. A lot of people find McCree's current rate of fire to be a bit much, so maybe toning it down back to a 0.5 second recovery time would feel better without gutting McCree. Before we move on, I want to briefly touch on Widowmaker. I personally think she should be the only character with a one-shot. When Widow is dived properly, she is very vulnerable. She doesn't have a stun like McCree or spam damage like Hanzo, or multiple escapes / crowd control like Doomfist does. Her assault rifle is pretty bad and her hook has a pretty long cooldown. Moving on to flat buffs. Most of these are flat numbers changes, so we can roll through them quickly. Ashe's Coach Gun cooldown lowered from 10 seconds to 9 seconds. A little more mobility for Ashe to reposition a bit easier. Baptiste. Biotic Launcher secondary fire. Health per shot increased from 50 to 60 health. Regen Burst. Health per second increased from 30 to 40. Regen Burst now heals 200 health over 5 seconds, instead of the previous 150. Baptiste recently got the classic Blizzard treatment where almost everything in his kit was shafted, so he could be shoved out of the meta. Healing with his secondary fire feels awful now. Reverting the health to 60 will make Baptiste feel like he originally did. And I would argue that the current Regen Burst is the worst ability in the game. A 15-second cooldown that doesn't even bring you to full health. On top of that, it requires line of sight with allies in a really small AoE. Upping the heals per second to 40 will ensure a full heal for Baptiste whenever he uses it. This takes pressure away from Baptiste's second support and allows him to self-sustain a little bit better. D.Va. Defense matrix range increased from 10 to 15 meters. Booster's cooldown increased from 3 to 4 seconds. After the defense matrix range reduction, D.Va has really struggled to save teammates. Reverting the range back to 15 should help D.Va feel like she used to. Because Matrix will be better, I decided that increasing the cooldown of boosters to 4 seconds would feel less oppressive. Nini Genji. Shuriken damage upped from 28 to 30. I find Genji to be mega annoying, but a lot of people have been saying that he's struggling in competitive, and yeah, he gets shut down by a lot and isn't very good outside of Nanoblade. So maybe upping his damage a smidge would help him a bit. Also, 28 is just a weird number. Junkrat. Primary fire projectile size reverted back from 0.2 to 0.3. After his initial projectile size nerf, Junkrat's primary fire became super inconsistent, which in the long run promoted random spam. Reverting the size will hopefully make Junkrat's damage more controlled and consistent. Mercy. Primary healing increased from 50 per second to 60 per second. Resurrect and Valkyrie will have a cast time decrease going from 1.75 seconds to 1 second. Mercy is in this weird spot where she's not a main healer or an off healer. If you run her with an off healer, you don't have enough healing. If you run her with a main support, you don't have a defensive ultimate. Returning Mercy's healing to 60 per second will solidify her main healer role. Unlike other main healers, Mercy can only heal one target at a time, so it doesn't make a lot of sense for her healing to be mediocre in its current state. As for Resurrect and Valkyrie being faster, Resurrect seems to be the only ability in the game that is unfun for both the Mercy player and the enemies facing her. Making the res faster in Valkyrie will semi-fix this problem. Many players find Valk to be really boring. Making Resurrect faster in Valkyrie could cause for some interesting ult usage if you want to res someone out of position. I know Mercy is a very touchy subject as she gave birth to one of the most annoying metas in Overwatch, but these changes aim to make her feel better to play while not being a must-pick. Orisa. Protective barrier health increased from 600 to 800 HP. Cooldown decreased from 10 to 9 seconds. They did a classic Blizzard and over-nerfed Orisa. These changes aim to bring back one of the main reasons to pick Orisa, which is her reliable shield.
Pharah.
Health changed to 150 white HP and 50 armor. I think Pharah is one of the most poorly designed characters in the game. She hard counters ground and projectile-based heroes, while getting hard countered by a decent hit scan. I don't know any other way to buff her without her becoming oppressive, so some armor in her base health is all she gets.
Sigma. Experimental barrier cooldown removed. Barrier health increased to 1000. Accretion now has reverse falloff damage, scaling from 70 at 0 meters up to 90 at 45 meters. So Sigma has been hit hard with the nerf hammer. Being one of my current favorite heroes, I tried to look at him with an unbiased view. Sigma does a lot of things, but currently, he doesn't do any one thing well. Removing the cooldown on the barrier will make it feel fluid like it originally did, and upping the health by 100 will ensure just a tiny bit more team protection. As for accretion, I understand why they lowered the damage, as with a combo of hyperspheres, Sigma could delete any 200 HP target. But it feels so weird to throw a giant rock at someone and have it hit for only 70. Giving the rock reverse falloff damage will reward Sigma players for hitting long-range shots just a little more.
Last of the purely numbers buffs is Zenyatta. Harmony Orb healing per second increased from 30 to 35. Honestly, Zenyatta's healing feels kind of bad right now. Like Mercy, he can only heal one target at a time, compared to Brig and Lucio, who can pump out a lot of healing to multiple teammates. Giving Zen a little more healing should feel better as both the player and the recipient. Let's continue on to the soft reworks / additions section. These are mostly buffs, but with the addition of a new ability or a semi-drastic change to an existing one. Brigida. Inspire's self-heals increased from 10.833 a second to 12 heals a second. Rally will now be a defensive ultimate, granting 250 armor a second for 2 seconds, capping at 500 bonus armor. After 1 second, the armor will decay over 2 seconds until only 100 bonus armor is left. The 100 bonus armor works like the current Rally, and will dissipate after 30 seconds or by taking damage. After her rework, Brig has felt a little awkward to use in some scenarios. Her brawly playstyle was changed to favor a more defensive style of play, which is fine, but when Brig does enter the brawl, her pathetic self-heals usually aren't enough to keep her sustained. 12 heals a second matches Lucio's self-heals and should feel a bit better in a brawl. As for Rally, I think it's always been in this weird spot. Brig is the only off-healer that doesn't have a defensive ultimate. Her ultimate has also been nerfed so many times throughout its lifespan, I think it's time for a rework. Making the ultimate work similarly to Sound Barrier will allow Brig players to counter enemy ultimates like Rav Dragon or Nano Blade. I opted for less bonus health than Lucio's Sound Barrier because I figured that keeping the semi-permanent bonus health from the current rally would be a good way to distinguish the two ultimates.
OP life-sucking Moira.
When healing allies at full HP with Biotic Grasp, Moira will grant her ally Overheal. This is bonus white HP that does not decay unless damaged. The bonus HP will be equal to 15% of the target's maximum health. For example, healing a 200 HP hero like Soldier 76 past full will grant him 30 extra HP, or when healing a 600 HP Roadhog past full, he will gain 90 extra HP. When the bonus health is depleted, Moira will have to heal her target back up to full to reapply it. A compensation nerf for this new idea is reverting the passive regeneration rate of Moira's healing from 2.4% per second to 2% per second. Much like her lore, Moira is the most controversial hero in Overwatch at the moment. She recently got a pretty harsh nerf to her main healing, lowering it from 80 heals a second down to 65. I personally am not in favor of returning it back to 80 heals a second, so I thought giving Moira just a little bit of utility would be a more fun option. Moira in the high ranks has struggled throughout Overwatch's lifespan because of her lack of utility. Why pick Moira when you could take any of the other main supports and gain their utility? Previously, the lack of utility was justified by Moira's extremely high healing output on her primary fire, but now that healing is just kind of okay at best. Moira will still retain her 65 healing a second, but now a team with Moira will be a little more tanky than the enemy team. 15% to be exact. To compensate for such a drastic new inclusion, I decided that reverting Moira's passive regen on her healing would be the best bet. Moira players will now have to rely more on damaging enemies for healing juice, instead of waiting for it to passively regen. Reinhardt. Steadfast knockback resistance lowered from 50% to 30%. However, Steadfast now also lowers the durations of stuns by 30%. So a lot of people, myself included, have found Reinhardt's recent buff to Steadfast to feel a bit oppressive. Characters like Lucio and Brig can do next to nothing to displace a Reinhardt if he wants to engage. Lowering the knockback resistance back down to 30% should alleviate this. However, as a compensation, I decided that Reinhardt should now be resistant to crowd control, as well as knockback. For some numbers, a freeze by Mei lasts 1.5 seconds. With Reinhardt's new Steadfast, 0.45 seconds will be shaved off of that stun, resulting in the Rein being frozen for 1.05 seconds. That small reduction allows Rein to keep in the action and continue defending his team. Roadhog. Take a Breather now leaves a cloud for 4 seconds that heals allies in a 10-meter area for 20 heals a second. However, his ultimate cost will be increased by 15%. At the time of finalizing the script, the experimental card has just hit Overwatch. I personally am not a big fan of many of the changes, but I love the idea of Roadhog healing his team. My version for 222 sees the cloud healing allies for a little less than the experimental card version, and without the damage reduction of that mode. Giving Roadhog this ability will allow him to actually provide some defense towards his team, and fulfill his bodyguard role. Insignificant, I mean Soldier 76. New ability, Precision Sights. Soldier aims down the barrel of his gun. In this mode, Pulse Rifle has increased accuracy, at the cost of firing slower, and now dealing with recoil. Since this ability will take the slot of his secondary ability, Helix Rocket will be moved to the Shift key, and Sprint will be activated via the Interact key. Oh, and he should be able to reload while sprinting. I think it's baffling that the entry character is considered one of the worst in the damage section. Soldier should never feel like a meta pick, but he should never feel like a bad pick either. I'm also baffled by the fact that the Call of Duty character doesn't have an aim down sights ability. Soldier 76's weapon is super inaccurate, which forces players to use a burst fire playstyle if they want to keep their accuracy high. Giving 76 a precision sights ability will allow him to play at further range at the cost of his weapon firing slower. This will solidify using hip fire in close range and precision sights when further away. Reloading while he sprints should have been added a while ago, to be honest. Dude spent so much time reloading. Last in this section is Winston with a new ability, Electro Ball. Great name, I know. After a half a second cast time, Winston fires a Symmetra-sized electric orb that deals 25 damage to a single enemy. Electro Ball has a cooldown of 8 seconds and travels at 35 meters a second, the same as a Pharaoh Rocket. Honestly, I was really debating putting Winston in the Fine category, However, Winston has always been kinda dependent on the meta favoring dive heroes, as by himself he can struggle to get eliminations before being killed himself. Giving Winston a long-range option gives him a tiny bit of poke damage, and will reduce his time to kill on a single target by a little bit. Last up, we have the flat reworks. These are more fine-tuned versions of reworks I suggested in previous videos on the channel, so apologies if you heard these before. One other big problem Overwatch has is the imbalance in the number of heroes per role. There are 16 damage heroes, compared to 8 tanks and 7 supports. Because of this, damage queue times are insane. Let's be honest, statistically it's more likely for a player to be a damage main, as there's just so many characters in that role. My idea to fix the DPS queue time problem is to take 5 characters out of the damage role and move them to other roles. This will even out the roles with the long-term goal of evening out queue times across the roles. A majority of these heroes have been consistently at the bottom in terms of pick rates for months, even years for some. So why not rework characters that are picked less than 1% of the time? Okay, let's start. Bastion will be reworked into a tank. His new health will be 300 white HP and 100 armor. The damage on his recon mode primary fire will be going down from 20 to 15. Self-repair will have its healing reduced from 75 per second to 60 per second. The max duration of self-repair will also be going down from 4 to 3 seconds. Reconfigure into Sentry mode will now have a 10-second cooldown. Sentry mode will now have a max duration of 5 seconds. Damage in Sentry mode will go down from 15 to 10. However, the spread decrease in Sentry mode will now take place after 1 second of firing instead of the current 2 seconds. Since Sentry mode is on a cooldown, the transformations will be faster. Transforming into Sentry mode will go from 1 second down to 0.7 seconds. Transforming back into Recon will go down from 0.5 seconds to 0.3 seconds. Bastion will also gain a new ability, which I labeled Defense Drone. With a 16-second cooldown, Bastion will throw down a device that reduces ally damage by 25% in an 8-meter AoE for 6 seconds. The device will be similar to an immortality field, but will not have a health bar. So, out of my perspective reworks from my Reworks for 222 video, this one got the most flack. The biggest argument I see against it is that Sentry mode should not be put on a cooldown. Honestly, I don't know how to go about making Bastion viable without placing some kind of limit on Sentry mode. My idea behind this rework is to lower Bastion's damage while increasing his defensive capabilities. The Defense Drone would also be a worthwhile ability to help defend against rush comps. Bastion is a very difficult character to balance, and I can understand why he hasn't gotten any changes, despite being the least picked character in the game for a while now. Actual Bastion mains, what would you do to make your character more viable? Let me know. Next we have Mei, who will also be reworked into a tank. Mei's health will be increased from 250 to 375. Her primary fire's damage per second will be lowered from 55 to 45. Multi-freeze will be removed. Icicle damage will be lowered from 75 to 60. Ice Wall will have its cooldown increased from 10 to 12 seconds. And lastly, Cryo Freeze will restore 25 ammo a second up to a max of 100. The idea behind this rework is to make Mei function a bit like Roadhog. She will still do everything she currently does, just with a little less lethality. Removing Multi-Freeze will reintroduce the ability for enemy tanks to body block the freeze for their allies, instead of the current version, where everyone is punished regardless. Mei is currently very problematic, due to her almost functioning like a third tank. She punishes out of position enemies and can save her team while also making space, just like a tank. So why not make her a tank? Last of the tank reworks, we got Symmetra. Symmetra's new health will be 175 HP and 175 shields, for a total of 350. Symmetra's new passive will be Photon Shields. Allies in a 20-meter range will gain 25 bonus shield HP. Photon Projector's ammo will be returned to 100. The primary fire will return to its 2.0 auto-lock form. However, this version will have a consistent 10-meter range. The damage will also be going down from 2.0, now being 25 damage per second at level 1, 50 damage per second at level 2, and 100 damage per second at level 3. The time to charge a level will be returned back to 1 second. However, the beam will retain its 2-second decay rate from 3.0. The secondary fire is going through a few drastic changes. The time to fully charge an orb is going up from 1 second to 1.5 seconds. Max orb damage will be lowered from 140 to 120. Uncharged orbs will move at 60 meters a second, slowing down to 15 meters a second when fully charged. Fully charged orbs will now pierce shields. Next is the turrets. Turret damage per second will be lowered from 40 DPS to 25 DPS. However, the slow will be increased from 20% per turret to 30% per turret. The cooldown on the turrets will also be lowered from 10 to 9 seconds. Last is Sim's new ability, Photon Field, which will replace the teleporter. This will be a 700 HP shield that is in the shape of a cube. The shield will be a channeled ability, which projects around Symmetra. The shield will have a length of 6 meters. Symmetra can channel the shield for a max of 6 seconds before being forced to drop it. The shield will have a 12-second cooldown. Since the shield will be fairly small, Symmetra is immune to stuns while casting and suffers no movement penalty. Okay, Symmetra is my most played hero, so this is going to be the longest explanation. In my opinion, the Symmetra 3.0 rework was a total failure. Not only did it fail to increase Symmetra's pick rates, but it also removed a character that most fell in love with. This 4.0 tank Symmetra aims to take aspects of 2.0, the beam, and 3.0, the orbs, and combo it with a useful shield and better crowd control with the turrets for a viable character. Maybe. The reason I mention a 10 meter consistent range on the primary fire is because 2.0 had this weird gimmick where to attach the beam you had to be 7 meters away, and then your range was up to 9.5. Making the beam a consistent 10 meters will remove a lot of confusion. Shield-piercing orbs is another feature returning from 2.0. These orbs would only pierce shields and not players like the previous version. I opted for increasing the charge time and lowering the speed of a fully charged orb to make room for the shield-piercing aspect. However, having a slow secondary fire has always been one of Symmetra's biggest issues. Not only does she have to charge her secondary fire, but it's super slow. Making uncharged orbs move faster gives players an actual reason to use them, which would be for long-range poke damage. 60 meters per second is the same speed as Genji's shurikens and Ana's sleep dart. While faster, these orbs can still be dodged. The recent 140 damage buff to Sim's orbs completely ignore the problems the ability has, which isn't the damage, it's the consistency. The aim with this weapon rework is to make Sim more consistent at close and mid-range. Moving on to the turrets. I feel some are going to bash me for lowering the damage on them, but hear me out. I feel the turrets should be a form of extra damage for a character. A lot of Symmetra players rely on the turrets to do the heavy lifting on her damage, since her weapon is so awkward to get value with. I feel that taking damage away from the turrets and making her gun more consistent is a healthier way to go about the character. However, one thing that always intrigued me about Symmetra's turrets is that they apply a slow. Unfortunately, the current 20% slow is barely noticeable unless you have all 3 turrets attacking the same target. Oddly enough, the slow on 2.0's turrets was 25% per turret, and she had 6 of them. Making the slow 30% will encourage spacing out the turrets for maximum value. Last up is the removal of Symmetra's teleporter and replacing it with a channeled barrier. I'll be honest, Symmetra's teleporter sounded so cool when it was initially revealed, but since 3.0 Tele's inception, the devs have proven that they can't balance Symmetra properly because of it. I mean, how can you make the damage on Symmetra more reliable when she has the capability to bypass chokes and take 2 CP maps with ease? Removing the teleporter is like removing the shackles off of Symmetra in my opinion. Let's talk about the barrier, which I renamed Photon Field. The easiest comparison is to Makoa's Shell Shield in Paladins. Photon Field will be a channeled ability, meaning that Sim can't do any other actions while projecting this barrier. Since my original concept of the ability, I decided to grant Symmetra CC immunity while casting the barrier, as it will be mega annoying to put your shield up and then get stunned out of it and blow the cooldown. Slows, hacks, and enemy damage will still affect Symmetra in this state however. If the Sim is unguarded, enemies can walk through her barrier and attack her directly. Symmetra can create anything out of light. It's a damn shame her current kit is so meh. Moving on. Torbjorn will be reworked into a support. His primary fire will have its damage lowered from 70 to 60. The primary fire projectile will no longer arc and always travel in a straight line. Torbjorn will have a new ability to replace his overload. The recharge station is a device that heals allies in a 12 meter range for 40 heals a second, and it does not require line of sight. The device has a normal 10-second cooldown and has 250 health. Another new, or returning ability, is the Armor Pack. Bound to secondary fire on Torbjorn's hammer, Torb can toss out an armor pack that grants 50 semi-permanent armor to a teammate. Armor pack has a cooldown of 15 seconds, and Torbjorn cannot use the pack himself. So, removing the arc on the primary fire is honestly one of my biggest nitpicks with Torbjorn. I cannot get a handle on hitting that projectile. The damage going down on the primary is to reflect Torbjorn's new role. I opted for keeping the secondary shotgun damage at the current 105. Torb's shotgun feels pretty meh since its nerf. It already suffers from spread and heavy damage falloff. As for his new ability Recharge Station, Torb was inspired by the TF2 engineer, so why not steal another one of his abilities with a twist? The Recharge Station will be the only healing in the game to not require line of sight. Torbjorn players will have to master map geometry and find optimal places to deploy the healing station. As for the cooldown being normal, the device can be destroyed, and having a huge downtime like the turret can be detrimental to a support's only healing ability. As for the armor pack coming back, it was a cool ability, and with its lowered bonus health, it won't be super annoying to face. Alrighty, last change here, reworking Sombra into a support. Yes, I decided to keep the same goofy rework from my original video. Translocator can now be attached to allies. Translocator heals allies for 15 heals a second in a 15 meter AoE. It now heals Sombra for 50 when she teleports. Hacked health packs will now grant Sombra ultimate charge at a reduced rate, generating 0.4% ultimate charge per 10 HP healed. Sombra will also gain a second version of her hack. With a 12-second cooldown, Sombra can hack one ally to grant them a 20% move speed and damage boost bonus for 4 seconds. Sombra in the current version of the game is an EMP bot. Her damage is pretty terrible, and it just seems weird that she gets no value from hacked health packs. In my original video, I said I was the most unsure about this rework since it's pretty goofy. I think hacking and healing allies could allow for a more fun playstyle, while still allowing Sombra to hack and flank enemies. And that's how I would balance Overwatch. Let me know what ideas you guys agree and disagree with below. And again, thank you all so much for 9,000 subscribers. I'm YellowNinja, and peace!
Max, I want to share my gift with you. Don't you dare run away. I have this barrier that I stole from Sim. You will not escape me.
I just wanted to know if you'd like to spend the rest of your life in my dark room. Your purity inspires me so much, and we could be so happy together. Who needs selfies when I have Symmetra's barrier?
Get over here. Let me capture you.
What's up, bitches, and welcome to my 9K subscriber special. If you host subscribed, I thank you. If you ain't, there's the door. Okay, I won't start it like that.
That's not how you properly introduce your fan base.
Heh.